Latina Leadership Podcast, the podcast made for Latinas by Latinas. Get comfortable, amiga, and enjoy the conversations.
I do, as usual, I always ask for bios, and I always ask my girls to dig as much as information, because I want to know who I'm talking to when I bring you on to these to the podcast. And every guest that comes to the podcast, we always try to do as much research as we can. So we dig a little, and learning a little bit about what you do and the agency work that you've done. A lot of the work that you do is around one, leadership, two, the inclusion of people of color into the space. I've always been interested in this. I've done my own research, but a lot of the research that is, a lot of the results that come out of Texas is completely different from the results that you get in California. So knowing this, well, let's start here. What is the difference between those Texas Hispanics or Latinos and those Californian Latinos and Hispanics? Would you say there's like a clear, defined difference, or are we all one and the same, and we can probably tell who's from where, or that's not a thing?
Well, I would say one of the things I love to say about Latinos, and by the way, there's all kinds of terms that people are using, whether that's Latine or Latinx or Hispanic. Mm-hmm. I think really you have to define who you are and how you want to be, what you want to be called, and how you want to identify yourself. And I would say what makes us so wonderful as a community that has a shared and a common heritage is actually our diversity. I think that a lot of people do not realize just, in fact, how diverse the Latino community is, not just in terms of where our roots are, whether that be from Mexico or Guatemala, Central America, Cuba, Puerto Rico, but the diversity that we have state to state, even community to community. Here in California, I grew up in Southeast Los Angeles. A lot of people have a lot of pride when they hear, my community, East Los Angeles. I grew up in the South, or I grew up in Northern California. And that really brings, different experiences, rural, urban. Certainly there's a lot of diversity as it relates to immigration. And there are a lot of assumptions. People will say to me, "What country are you from?" And I actually say Texas. And they say, right? And they say, "Well, what does that mean?" And I say, "Well, in fact, my family on my father's side, I am the 11th generation, and which is wild. A lot of people amazing. Don't.
Right? It's amazing, Valerie. That's not. It's might not be unheard of that many generations down, but those are very solemnly, and you only hear it in stories. The fact that that's part of your story is amazing. I just wanted to put out there. Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you, speaking of stories, so once I found out that there was actually a lot of research that had been done on my family, a lot of the stories that my family told, we found out were untrue, or we found out that the details behind them, because stories get passed down right over time, and they change, through just from family to family. But my point is that I think that the Latino community is not monolithic by any stretch of the imagination, in terms of our individual backgrounds, what we bring to the table, in terms of our as I said, our stories of how we came to be. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what's beautiful. So when you say what's the difference between, the Tejanos or Tejanas and those of us from California, I say actually, really, it comes down to there's probably more that we have in common. Yeah. And again, it's the diversity that I think is really beautiful, and a love of family, for sure. A love of, I think, many of us can say our language or customs, many of them that we share, and many that might be some things that you might do in your family, in your community in Texas and Houston that we may not know. But that's the beauty of being a part of this incredible Latino community.
I agree. I have many friends who do come from California and they ease right into being here in Texas and in Houston, and they're like, yeah, it's kind of no different. You all get to The only probably difference is the food, right? Y'all are close to the ocean more so. And I have to say, Californian Mexican food is quite good. I can't
Well,
complain.
the regional, there's a lot of pride in wherever you're from as it being the best. I don't know. I'm going to reserve that judgment for those of you out there. I do love our Mexican, our Chicano, I would say our very Chicano influenced our
Mhm.
Mexican food here in Los Angeles.
Thank you. Thank you. So let's talk a little bit about your work. I want to talk about the work that you're proud of, the stuff that you've been working on. Tell me a little bit about your work. What is it that compels you to continue? Um, what is it that compels you to continue down the road of the type of work that you do? Why do you do it? And I mentioned maybe one or two instances that you're one of those projects that you're very proud of, and why.
Sure. I think in order for me to talk about the work that I'm really proud of, it really starts with the beginning of how I got to the work.
Okay.
So I think that really helps. And because most people don't grow up saying, I want to be a public relations person.
No.
They have, nobody knows what does that even mean. I'm still answering that and telling people at the Thanksgiving table. So to me, as I said, it begins in the early years. When I was in high school, I was thrilled to get into UCLA.
Mhm.
As I said, I grew up in Southgate, which is a working class Latino city in Southeast Los Angeles. And when I went to share the very exciting news with my guidance counselor, she told me, please go somewhere else. UCLA is going to be too hard for you. And for me, and that was devastating, by the way, to hear that.
Mhm.
Um, that was the first clue for me of the connection, the nexus between zip code, race, ethnicity, and opportunity. And the truth is, she was right. It was hard, but it was hard because not for the reasons that I understood until later. And that was because my inner city public school education did not prepare me for the rigors of the university. And here I was, an A student, someone who did very well all my years, my young years. And then I went to college and I realized that there were other kids that were far ahead of me, that were on track because they had, the gift, the privilege of a better education because of where they lived, where they came from, and the legacy of college in their families that gave them guidance that I did not have. But what I had was potential. What I had was the example that my parents and my grandparents gave to me, the hard work, resilience, grit that comes from people who work with their hands, who were janitors and farm workers, who worked in junkyards, people who had incredible pride in their work. Maybe they didn't understand and have the ability to relate to people who were in college, but they knew it was important. So for me, that clicked when I was in college that there was a gap, And that's really where I became very interested in pursuing whatever it was I was going to do as a career to close that gap, because I understood that it was unfair, it was inequitable. And so when I became a student journalist and I realized that you could use communications to uplift and help people understand the truth behind this gap and close that gap, that for me was where the journey to communications began. And over 30 years now, in terms of what I do for this agency, it all starts there.
So, down your journey, and you understand now that you can have these conversations and you can begin to tell those stories and understand why those stories exist. When we give a lot of, because I'm also in PR, right? When we give kind of explanations as to what like PR is and what it does and what it can do for a nonprofit, for an actual like business to business or a company or an organization, whatever it may be, right? we take pride in the work that we do. So, in order for someone to understand what exactly it is that you do, can you give us just a small snippet of what project you did and why it served its purpose?
So people tend to think about public relations as publicity,
Mm-hmm.
like in entertainment, and that certainly is one form of it. Or they think about advertising, like something you see on a billboard. And the communications that I'm involved in, when we talk about strategic, integrated strategic communications, it's really about surrounding and connecting with an audience, multiple audiences, often multicultural, multilingual, to help inform them and to help shape behaviors, to help motivate them, to help make their lives better. For example, right now is election season. And, this is election season is always a tough time because I think many people would agree that unfortunately, many folks in the United States do not have a full sense or appreciation for what it took to get the rights that we have, what it is an inalienable right for us to be a part of democracy, to vote, and that people die in other countries. People suffer for not, just to have that privilege, and we have it here. But every election season, we have to motivate people. We have to explain to them how important how their vote matters. So one of the most consequential things that we do is get out the vote work. And we do that in Los Angeles County as an example. We do it in other places around the country, so that people have the ability to use their vote as their voice. And in terms of what that looks like, here in Los Angeles County, any billboard you see, any radio spot that you hear, regardless of in multiple languages, a television spot, what you see on your feed, on your digital feed, on your social feed, we're involved in that. We're behind that. We're working with our client to make sure that all of those audiences, young, seasoned, Latino, Black, Asia Pacific Islander, multilingual, understand how important it is to vote. Why that's, and getting them the most important information so that they can do so and feel empowered and safe to do so. So for us, that's part of communications, coming up with the strategy so that we can connect and engage and motivate them. We do that for getting out the vote, as I mentioned. I will tell you, during the pandemic, the work that we did to inform people around the country about what they needed to do in terms of basic information regarding the vaccines, what they needed to do to keep themselves safe, was critical. We worked on the census, which is very complicated, can be very complicated and esoteric. But in the middle of the pandemic, explaining to people, connecting with them as to the why. Why does it matter? Why should I fill this out? What difference does it make to me? A person who may feel disconnected from something that they may feel has no impact on their life. Our job as communicators, as those who are invested in social impact, is to show them and to prove the social impact through our communications.
As we go through the journey of a professional career, I like to take mental notes of things that I would love to say to younger professionals seeking the same type of work or even in the same field, whether it's marketing, ad buying, whatever, like mass communication they're trying to seek out, right? Now that you have been along that journey for so long and have done it for quite some time and understanding what it takes to actually be effective in your career, in your profession, what advice would you give your younger self, as Valerie, your younger self, or somebody who's seeking a same trajectory of career?
Well, I'll tell you, I would say so many things to my younger self. A lot of things. I think particularly as a woman of color, one of the things I would have said, and I think it's, whether it's 30 years ago, I think it's still resonant now, is to ignore the little voice of imposter syndrome. The little and sometimes maybe even loud voice can tell you that you're not good enough, that you don't know better. Someone else is smarter. Someone else deserves the job more. What do I know? Maybe not me. And I would say it's time to clap back. I would tell my younger self, and I would give that advice to any, particularly women of color, to clap back to that voice and say, why not me? And to turn around all of the things that we have been taught or have been inculcated with as a negative, as a positive. For example, many of us have had backgrounds that have been very challenging, socioeconomically, particularly, economically for sure. Maybe we haven't had the road hasn't been as easy, particularly as it relates to education. I can go on and on. But those are the things that build the types of skill sets, the types of lived-in experiences that you absolutely will use as a leader and through your journey. I had no idea how much resilience and grit, agility, particularly given the background that I've had, how much agility, and watching that example of my parents dealing with all kinds of challenges, that has served me so well. So to me, all of the things that we have been told are negatives, we should turn them into positives because they strengthen us. And our diversity is an asset. It's a huge asset. In this country right now, you see this horrible trend of DEI being, really just decimated, right? Under attack. Just 4 years ago, it was valued. This was something that companies were talking about, and now we see what's happened with affirmative action and just the politics, how it's being dismantled. But the truth is that because we come from diverse backgrounds, we have the lived-in experience that we can relate to the people that our clients are trying to serve. The people that our clients are trying to serve in communications look like us. They are diverse. And so we have an insight, we have perspectives and backgrounds that can relate to a better understanding of how to serve those audiences. So for example, I'll bring up, I just mentioned the census. Mm-hmm. And if we know in our communities that there are concerns around privacy, around giving personal information for a variety of reasons, for historical reasons, frankly, that gives us insight into how we put together our strategies and our messaging. Being a person of color and underrepresented in communications, this is our moment. If there ever was a moment. 30 years ago, when I started in this industry, diversity was very low. I am so sorry to say that it hasn't changed for the better. 30 years later, only 21% in the communications industry are people of color, and it's even smaller at the leadership level. So back to the advice. The advice is to ignore the imposter syndrome, to value who you are, to uplift your gift of diversity, and to bring your whole self to whatever job that it is.
As you're talking about, because this comes up a lot, the imposter syndrome, right? It's hard to ignore it. It's hard to, so let's talk about your challenges. Let's talk about your challenges within transitioning from one job to the next, or having to voice not just your opinion, but your criticism in a space where niceties are always played, because that's PR, right? We want everybody to play along in such a great fashion that people think we have it all together. But for you, what challenges did you face and how did you overcome them? Did you overcome them? What did you learn?
Sure. So I think that if you really want to sort of take apart imposter syndrome, there's like sort of many ways of looking at it. For me, one of the ways was I felt like I had a lot of confidence. I've always had a lot of confidence. But when it came down to the opportunity to become CEO, I said, whoa, wait a minute. And I think part of it was I had trepidation because I thought, I mean, if you look at the examples of leaders, CEOs, they don't look like us, right?
No, they don't.
It's very, they don't. And so I think that I bought into that a little bit. I thought, well, maybe subconsciously, they don't look like us, but also, well, I don't have an MBA. I don't have, a finance degree. I haven't been in that role before. And so I began to think about the things I didn't have, the skill sets that I thought that would make us for a successful CEO. And I thought, well, gosh, it didn't even dawn on me that I would be a candidate for this type of a position in my career. Was not even something I even thought about. And to me, I didn't realize that. I just said, well, no, it was never something I had on sort of a goal for myself. But over the years, I realized now that I've been in this role, I didn't see it as a goal. I should have. But because of, I think, the imposter syndrome and a lot of what I think society tells us and what we see, the examples that we see, when it came time for this opportunity to come around, I literally, I could think of all the reasons why I could not do it. I should not do it. I wasn't qualified. I didn't think about all of the hundreds of reasons why I was qualified. And that for me was a moment that I'm still actually getting my head around. And I still have to remind myself when I have moments of doubt, as you mentioned, sometimes the voice is you can't turn it off, but you do have to work at it. And it's something that I'm still working on. But what I really appreciate now is that I recognize it. And when it comes, I say, oh no. And I use the words of, well, instead of why me, why not me? And I do think about, I'll figure it out. And that has gotten me through dealing with that internal challenge of transition. And it's been about 3 years since I've been in this role. So to me, it's one of those things. It hasn't been about lack of support because I found that people have been extremely supportive. It's really about what's inside, what's in my own head and heart that I've had to face as the biggest challenges versus the external folks, if that makes sense.
No, that does make sense. That makes a lot of sense. So we just pitched her an RFP just a couple of days ago, and my God, you know how stressful those can be sometimes.
So
you don't know what to expect, and you're getting questions, and you're like, "Dang, we didn't even prepare for that." So it's like
a lot of work,
and so you're kind of on the fly trying to answer questions, and they're doing their due diligence. They're really need to see how you react or how you can how fast can you think on your feet to be able to give them what they need, right? So as we were pitching for this RFP, I told a friend of mine that we did it, and I told her who it was for, and she's like, "You should have called me. I could have prepped you. I could have, and I didn't think of even asking anybody for help. I didn't think about, hey, can you can I pitch to you, and then you give me some feedback?" And she's in the field, right? She's the one that puts up the RFPs to see what she gets back. And so, with that being said, there's a lot of, we don't know when to ask for help. We should know everything, apparently. I don't know how.
You hit the nail on the head.
Yeah. We need to know everything.
No, and I think that you hit the nail on the head, because I think that we have always feel responsible.
Mm-hmm.
We feel responsible, and it's very difficult to ask for help because we feel like, well, we have to figure it out. I'll figure it out. I will figure it out. Yeah. And that's what we do, because we've spent our lives figuring it out, right? And so I think that what you just explained is an example of how what we need to now learn, and something that very successful people do, and I've watched them, is exactly what you described, is to take a step back and say, I don't know everything. I will, quote, figure it out, but I don't have to be the only one. I can surround myself with people who care and are kind and want to be a part of my success, and be collaborative, and we can figure it out together. Yeah. But I completely agree. It's we're I don't know. It's kind of in the DNA.
Mm-hmm. A lot of people want to see us succeed, and before we started recording, I told you on here, there is no gotcha moment. There is no, I'm going to make this incredible podcast by, pressing the hard questions and making them. Absolutely not. That's not inspiring. To me, that's not inspiring. And on this podcast I've never committed to that. And I don't want to, because I want to be a source of help. I want to be a source of where you can come and you feel not that there's like this exaggerated positivity, but we have real conversations on here. And they're tough conversations, honest. And that's what I want to continue doing. So to be able to do that, one of the things that I have done, and I've seen success in in seeking a mentor has actually done for me in my career, has done for me in my growth as a person, wanting to be more professional, wanting to achieve more, wanting to do more. So let's touch on that a little bit. What is mentorship for you, and what has it done for you, or has it done anything for you?
I think mentorship is so powerful. I think that mentorship is essential. I think it goes both ways. I think that as much as you gain, you have to be intentional about giving. And I see, obviously, that's something that you do, Anjelica. And for me, early on in my, so there's the traditional mentor that we see in our career, mm-hmm. which is, I think, essential. And we should have multiple mentors at different times of our career. And I certainly think that that's been very helpful for me in all forms, and in ways that you would not expect, and people you might not expect. But I also think that it comes early. And it's just not a word that we necessarily recognize and understand as a concept growing up. But I think back, and I challenge people who, especially young people, and they say, oh, I will get contacted a lot and say, will you be my mentor? And I say, I'm certainly happy, to do that. But I'll also challenge people and say, they exist in our families, amongst our friends. Mm-hmm. It's just that we don't look at it traditionally that way. How many times have we had an aunt, an uncle, a cousin, a godparent say something that really makes us think? It's a life lesson. So I think that we have incredible sources of mentorship that already exist. They may not be able to talk about our field, but they can talk about life lessons. They can talk about when we're back to trying to ask for help. They may not have faced some of the challenges of putting together an RFP or something, mm-hmm. A big national campaign, but they certainly know people, right? So I think that mentorship is important in these places of family and friends in those spheres. But early on, I actually asked for a mentor at my first big job. I felt like I was struggling. I felt like to understand the craft of public relations. Mm-hmm. I was learning as I was going, which most people do, but I needed someone who I could say, hey, will you be my mentor? Mm-hmm. And once I asked for that, I tell you, that was 30 years ago. I don't make a move without her still. I talk things through. And I think what's important about mentorship, and I tell people this all the time, yes, we want to boost people. Yes, we want to be encouraging, but more importantly, it's really critical for someone that you trust to tell you the truth, that cares about you enough to be honest. It's not about saying, "Oh, you're great," and that's wonderful, and you're doing well, but to say, "Listen, I hear about your challenge or your problem, but let me give you some constructive feedback. I don't want to hurt your feelings," and us to be able to take that in, because that's the only way we're going to learn. We're only going to learn if we hear the truth, and especially in the most difficult times when we think we have failed, when we have in fact not met our goals or let ourselves down, not met the mark. That's when the greatest learning is. So I think that mentorship is important, but it has to have that honesty.
I thank you for actually pointing a lot of that out, because when I seeked out a mentor, I thought the mentor had to be in your field and they had to be in a position that you wanted. But when I seeked out a mentor, there was things in the person that I seen that I wanted to like learn from. Maybe not be exactly like this person when they, I'm talking about things, I told him this before. I'm talking about like patience. I'm talking about learning when to stop talking, learning when to listen, learning when to understand what they're truly trying to say, reading below the lines, and I'm able to think a little ahead as opposed to in the moment, right? Because that's the way I work. I work in the moment. Like the time is now, Yeah, the time is now, but there's a future. And the future, there's an effective future. There's things that we do today that can affect the future. And so I wanted to be able to think more like outside of myself and be able to obtain some of those qualities. Maybe not truly what they are to this person, but to me, And so that's how I see my mentorship. So thank you very much for bringing that up, that a mentor is not necessarily somebody who's your boss, right? Or somebody who just happens to work in another company doing the same thing you're doing, but at a much more high rating, achievable thing. That's not, it is sometimes can be your brother or your sister or someone that you truly tell yourself, yeah, I can relate. I can relate to what you're saying. I can relate. And I think I'm learning from you. How can I continue to learn from this person? To me, that's a mentorship. It's amazing to hear that you, at this point, have had a lifetime mentor to be able to bounce ideas, and who knows you personally, who knows what you're probably thinking before you're even thinking the thoughts.
So, yeah, she'll always tell me the truth, and I appreciate that. I mean, I have, so many of them. She's in the person in particular that I mentioned. I'll call her and I'll say, she'll say, "Okay, I'll call BS on that," and I appreciate that. I had to censor myself. I appreciate that because, especially when you have that kind of a relationship, you need that, because in the end, cheerleading is very important. It's absolutely important. You can do it, whatever your challenge or, any adversity that you're facing in your career. But what's really helpful is understanding the lessons so that you could figure out how to be, when you're talking about being anticipatory, how to think about the future, how to be, plot out whatever goals you have on down the line. Those are not easy things to think about. They're scary. They're scary, right?
They're scary. Yeah, they truly really are. Okay. So I'm sorry. I think I cut you off, and I didn't mean to do that. Did I cut you off?
No, not at all. No.
Okay. I'm so sorry about that. I want to be very respectful of your time, and I know we're leading into. You're a busy woman. You got stuff you need to do. You got work you got to get to. Before I let you go, it sounds like this is very sudden, but I definitely understand. You got to do stuff. So I'm trying to tell myself, because I can continue the conversation, and if you allow me, Valerie, I probably will. So let's avoid that.
Sure.
Let's avoid the on and the Anjelica can talk forever.
Don't worry.
what I don't want to do is leave time out to actually ask you this question that I ask every Latina on here. Every person that has come through the podcast, I ask them the same question. Do you consider yourself a leader? Why and why not?
Absolutely. And I think that leadership is a calling. And I think, at least for me and most people that I talk to who are leaders, it comes early. You just have to decide if you listen to it and you follow it. And I think that you ask, well, why, how do I know? And I think that leaders are natural, troubleshooters. They like to solve problems. They like to sort of tackle them, take them apart. Maybe it's a feeling of responsibility, or it's enjoying the challenge of figuring something out. And I think it can start very young. And many times it happens. It's I think there's a saying that says, leadership. You're either called, you can be called to it, or it calls you. And sometimes when you're young, and there are challenges that you experience in your community and your family, you jump to it. You respond. It's troubleshooting. It's problem solving. And I think that we develop a knack for it early as leaders. And you just decide if you're going to listen to that calling. And part of it is respecting that calling too. Respecting that you are a leader, at least for myself. I like to say that I believe in leadership, but I call it being compassionate also and empathetic, but with cojones. I think that, right? I think that it's important that we're humble, but yet we have confidence. You have to have both. And to me, I think that's what great leaders do. I don't know that it's ever something that I can check off the box. It's something I'm always aspiring to. I'm always learning about being a good leader. I want to hear more about how to be a better leader. But I know that in my heart, I am one. And I enjoy working with people so that they can find their inner leader, so that they can figure out and listen to that voice, so that they can do their own troubleshooting and do their own figuring out what their calling is. So to me, that's really what leadership means to me.
That's a really great response. I really like that one. Yes, thank you. Thank you for that. Is there anything, Valerie, that I did not ask or you did not mention that you would like to share with us?
Sure. I'd love to. The only thing I'd love to share is that one of the things you asked me about great projects and examples of social impact, and I want to talk about just really quickly.
Absolutely.
My team, I'm so proud of my team. We're working in so many important areas right now, getting out the vote, protecting democracy, which is clearly under attack and is going to be under attack in the United States this year. And just over the last few weeks, we've represented a client called Resolve, the National Infertility Association, in the battle on the ground in Alabama to protect reproductive rights, and how important it is knowing that many of your listeners and viewers are women, how we are going to continue to do what we can as a communications firm with all of our clients, nonprofits, government clients in the corporate sector, advocates, to protect the rights of everyone, especially women, Latinas, women of all colors and backgrounds. And we're so proud to do that with this client in particular. And it's going to be a very challenging year where, there are so many threats to our freedoms and threats to advancement, what's happening along our border. That's something that we're very interested in, what's happening as it relates to continued gun violence in our communities. This is something that we feel are areas that are critically important, and we are so honored to work with clients who are the change makers dealing with these very, very serious issues that are very consequential to all of our lives.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. When a topic is definitely important to you, we do our best, do our due diligence to try to serve our community. Gracias for that.
Thank you.
Valerie, Thank you so, so much for being on the podcast. Thank you so, so much for taking the time and giving me the opportunity to introduce you to the audience and especially to like interview you. Muchas, muchas gracias. I hope our audience enjoyed this. And with that being said, Mujeres Amigas, we'll see you next time. And with that, you have an amazing day.
Thanks, you too.
What did you think of the conversation? If you enjoyed what you heard, let us know in the comments. And please don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with your friends. Thank you for listening to the Latina Leadership Podcast, and we will see you next time.